we joke around all day long, but when night time comes, we joke around some more. Just throw your coat on the pile and get yourself out on the wall. Just throw your coat on the pile.
But I'm just so flattered, number one, that we were able to do this, because I listened to your podcast, I discovered it, and I was out one night. I'm sort of, maybe I don't think it's weird or abnormal, but I like to go out late at night, see a movie by myself, because I enjoy going to the movies by myself to decompress. Then I get a beer or two and eat some fattening food once a week. And I was listening to your podcast. And number one, I think the project is great, so certainly got to talk about that. But when you were talking about self-sabotage and talking about your life and going to medical school, but especially self-sabotage, man, that just hit me. Because I'm going through my own midlife crisis. And I said, let me send an email out to the ether. So number one, I just want to thank you for that project. And that moment of clarity you offered there and just sort of transparency was so helpful.
The world is hungry for people being open. Here's my formula, by the way, for being successful in life. And for me, it's translating in the world. So the formula is simply this, and I'm already applying it somewhat to you. You don't even know it yet. But the formula is get where people are coming from. And that's usually at least 2 levels below the conversation you're having. And so what I hear from what you're saying is, first of all, I appreciate the appreciation. But when you're saying about the self-sabotage and you're in midlife and it hits you directly, what that let me know is that you'd like to eliminate some of the things that have probably not served you. And you hope you can do it. Probably some areas where you would say, Mark or Dr. Mark, call me whatever you want. I don't, this has always been with me. I'm not sure I can lick it. And so get where someone's coming from a couple levels below what they're speaking about. Get where they want to go. Use anything and everything you have to get them there and never ask for anything in return. Yeah, my father died 22 years ago and he was a numbers guy. And so when I was growing up, if I got a 90, he would say, you can do better. And what I took that to mean is he was saying, this is crap. What I realized is when you're a numbers person, someone gets a 90, you can do better. See, what was missing, and what I tell all parents to use with their kids, is if he had said to me, you can do even better, it would have felt differently. And so for the last couple of years, my dad's been dead for 22 years, I've been accepting his apology that I never received, which was, he's telling me, I think you're great. I didn't think that 90 was bad. I think you're great. And I'm amazed with what you've done with your life. And as I accept his apology that I never received, I think of him and I say, I'm sorry that I held a grudge against you. I'm sorry that I had a chip on my shoulder and resented you for something that you didn't even mean. And when I say that, I can feel like I'm really letting go of stuff. So it's one of the best quotes I've ever heard. Forgiveness is accepting the apology you'll never receive.
It's funny you mentioned your father, a moment of kismet there, because my father passed away 13 years ago. He was a World War II veteran, a lot older than my mom, and he died on D-Day. So I think he chose a good day to go. And all these years, my father, I'm working class, and he was always working. And you're growing up and, the age difference, people thought my father was my grandfather, so that creates some sort of resentment. But he wasn't around as much as I wanted him to be. But now as an adult, I've since forgiven him years later. You have that resentment, but I'll never forget, I was watching something on TV, and it was an awards show, and it was these 2 athletes talking about their father and how he was always on the road. But when the money would show up, they realized that was his way of being there. And then you reach a certain age of maturity, and you're like, my God, my father was there in all these different ways. But maybe from that point of view as a child, I wasn't able to see that. And it's just funny, as I said, you look back on your life and try to gain that perspective. But thinking about, you're an expert on human behavior. As I said, you're a student of the human mind. And I'm very fascinated by everybody who I ask this question, so feel free to pass. But from where you're sitting and your disciplinary priors and just life perspective, how do you think this moment came to pass in this country? Because everybody's giving me different answers, and I'm very fascinated by them.
First of all, I think one of the reasons he won the election and Hillary lost it, I talk about, I often mentor and coach leaders, and I talk about declarative versus explanatory leadership. It was the Declaration of Independence. It wasn't the explanation of independence. And so Donald Trump was much more declarative, and Hillary was more explanatory. And when you're declarative, and people are afraid and doubting and confused, and you're declaring, this is where I stand and what I stand for, it doesn't even matter what the words are. You kind of imprint on them. And what was happening is that I think people felt frustrated and disempowered, and they lacked trust and confidence in gridlock. And so he came out declaring, and the interesting thing, and I think it actually may partially explain why his supporters still support him. I mean, you read the polls that he's losing support. I think what happened in a moment of frustration, disempowerment, the working class being replaced and downsized, I think his supporters imprinted on him, and that's why they don't even listen to the content. Many of them are still supportive of him. And the reason for that, and it does reflect a moment in our time, so many people are feeling frustrated, disempowered, that when you can imprint on something and you deeply imprint on it, you don't let go of it because, rightly or wrongly, it's like a psychological stabilizer in your minds. And so you don't listen to logic, because what happens is if you've been floating around, not able to attach to anything like that, any true north, I think when you imprint on it, you don't want to go back to that state of not being able to imprint on anything. And so you keep listening to this person, and it doesn't even matter their words. It's my Donald, right or wrong. And I think what it really reflects is people's loss of trust and confidence in institutions, loss of trust and confidence in themselves. There's a saying that I have that I talk about, that you've had these in your life, I've had them in my life, but in situations when as right as you thought you were is as wrong as you turned out to be, you begin to doubt everything you think. You begin to think, geez, how can I be right about anything? That was a sure thing.
But if you were going to talk to Hillary or other folks running against Trump, what specifics would you communicate? Because I think, again, you're spot on, because I voted against Trump, and I've been very vocal in my criticism of him. But I'll tell you this. I could tell you what he stood for, and I could tell you that he was entertaining, and I could tell you that he's must-watch TV, and I couldn't say those things about Hillary. So in terms of leadership, how would you have advised her?
Well, what I would have said, and again, I blog and I sent things off to CNN, but barriers to entry, even though I blog for the Huffington Post. But what I would say is, President Trump, it's clear that you're really passionate about certain things. Isn't that true? Yes. The things that you appear to be passionate about